Hello friends, it's Laura here from The Change, and I just want to welcome you to our mini-series of minisodes. We're bringing you a selection of our interviews from across seasons 1 to 3, where we've spoken to some amazing women, and we thought, well, why not take some of the bestest of the best bits and bring them to you in little sneaky snippets while we get busy preparing season 4 with a whole bunch of new interviews. So have a cup of tea, sit back and have a little listen to some of our highlights with some great banter and chats with some brilliant women. We'll catch you soon. Bye.
This week we hear the best from the amazing Georgia Van Cuylenburg, who we interviewed in Season 2, Episode 9. Enjoy.
An anorexic person is fighting everybody else but themselves because it's easier. When families put a lot of pressure and focus on trying to fix, we can fight them and not our eating disorder and our own mental challenges and physical challenges. And that's why the best thing, in a way, a parent can do is love unconditionally and let the battle be theirs and not try and restrict and, keep them safe. But my mum is a total fixer. She's too smart. She's way too smart to leave. She wanted to fix it, and Hugh did the opposite and just kind of went, I'm over this. He said at one point, we went to a family therapy, and he said, if you're not better by Tuesday, I'm out. I'm not coming to Unfreeze again. And probably something he's embarrassed, he said, but it is important, and I feel okay sharing that because he's been very public about how he gave up on.
But for context, how old were you and how old was he at the time?
I think roughly, and it is so funny because Hugh tells these stories with all sorts of random ages where I'm like, that is not when we were there, but cool. Go for it. I don't, with this part of the story, it doesn't matter to me too much, but I think I was about 16.
Yep.
He would have been 19. So he graduated from high school and it was at a point where he didn't want to have to deal with his sick sister.
I have a 22-year-old son and I have 19-year-old daughters. So I can kind of get into the head of a 19-year-old boy and kind of just go, you know what? Yeah, I'm done. Like I can't deal with this. So as heartbreaking as it would have been for you all as a family, I can understand that reaction as a mum.
Oh, 100%. And it's important I think, to share this is that male dominant brains, people with a lot of masculine thinking traits, that is their choice. They either go into fix or they disassociate. And it's really important. I really love the podcast and what you're doing because I think it's amazing to hear from women who just have so much more shit going on in their world. We see women lean in so much more than men. And I think it is important to say that, not with any anger, but just like it's literally a biological fact. Like that is how they respond. If they can't fix it, they push away. So anyway, I went through all of this, but I share that because it's important because of what happened when Hugh became well known and the way that it all transpired. I left to America after I graduated, and Hugh and I really floated apart, obviously, because I wasn't in anyone's life, and Josh finished school and I wasn't there. So it was like I chose to come here to spread positive messages for kids, and it also gave me a bit of a chance to start with a new story in a way, or a fresh start. But before I left, I did a play about eating disorders and made my story very public. So I did this play, Read My Lips, and got to win some awards and was on the TV. And because I never wanted this to be secret, I always thought the more secret we make these things, the more sick people become, because there's shame on top, there's guilt, there's not a willingness to share. And like grief, like anything, it needs air. And the more we make people feel bad for having this stuff, the longer it's going to be a problem. So I tried really hard to, as I said, end the silence, and did that, came here, and just to sort of cut to the chase, Hugh started a company based off that journey and started doing all that stuff. And I just sort of watched from afar, wondering what that was that he was doing. And it was also based on his trip to India and watching the difference in kids who had nothing and their mental resilience, and me who had grown up in this perfect world and had such challenges. He started getting a lot of traction and started speaking all across Australia. And it started growing and growing and growing and selling out concert halls and all that sort of stuff. He was doing that, and it felt weird. It felt very
I'm not surprised.
that this story was being used Hugh's an incredible storyteller. And part of that is you can't tell a story without exaggerating or, dramatizing things. And that felt a bit weird too, that there was never like, could you tell me the dates? Could you tell me the things? And it just sort of had evolved into his version of my story. And then in 2008, a situation happened with the man I was dating, and immediately that next day I had this full memory regression of everything that had happened. I could see it. I could see the path. I could feel the man, and called my parents as soon as they woke up. I was just hysterical. I'm not a crier and never had been. And I just couldn't not cry. And we went through the kind of like, could this have happened? Was there a time? Did you notice a difference? And then I just happened to be coming back to Australia a couple of weeks later I have FODMAP malabsorption. Yay, trauma. And so was getting treated for that for the first time ever in Australia, because Melbourne's the home of it. And went back and went to my therapist from my anorexia, the psychiatrist, and said to him, guess what, Bill, this all happened. And he said, I had a feeling after your first session with me. I called them in and asked if anything had happened. And I said, I'm going to treat her as someone that has been, because she's showing all the signs. So there was this sort of little validation.
That's pretty good for you. Like, that's a good outcome, even though you didn't know it at the time.
He's an incredible man. We ended up parting ways because of differing opinions about how to heal from an eating disorder, but I still love him and respect him for helping me come to terms with my body and relationships. So all of this to be said, told the boys, and again, Hugh shut down, as is his way of coping. Josh leaned in because that's Josh's way of coping. And then sort of left it there. And then we, as a family, tried to create this world post this happened to us. And I think in a way it was a blessing for my parents, because they'd held so much guilt around what had happened. And, no family and no trauma lives in isolation, but certainly there'd been a trigger that they didn't know about, and they could form a friendship and a relationship with me based on a new start in a way. And we now are very, very close and know our limitations and know our differences, but there's no annoyed with mum and dad moments anymore. Thank goodness, because I didn't want that for the rest of our lives. Anyway, Hugh went off and became very successful and very well known in this story. Unfortunately, he texted me and asked if he could start talking about the sexual trauma. And I said, we need to talk on the phone. And he didn't want to do that. And he left it for a while and then just started talking about it. And that was very confusing to me. And as they grew and the podcast happened, and it just constantly felt like, I think I should be consulted at some point here. And I didn't know how to broach that, because we had such a like sort of don't talk about the bad stuff relationship. And when his first book was coming out, we were given a gift in that chapter that he wrote, because he wrote, I'm more than the loss of potential in my sister was a line he had at the end of the chapter where he tells what happened to me. And I said, no, I will not allow you to do that, because you have the opportunity to tell a story of hope for victims of trauma. Like, I'm not someone that wants to reel off their resume, but I send him a long voicemail and I was like, you don't know me. And I sort of went into this. I was like, I started a nonprofit here. I started two nonprofits in Africa. I have lived in a country by myself on my own for this long. I volunteer every day. I was like, Hugh, we used to watch Star Wars every day, and I'm in Star Wars. Like, what exactly potential-wise your sister would meet that she hasn't? And we got on the phone that night and did a 3-hour call. And it was a lot of like, he said, I feel like you've deserted me. And I said, I feel like you've deserted. Like, we just put it all out there. And there was anger to share, but not in angry ways. And that was the beginning of the healing. We're still going through it and hard, because he's got such a big life with his kids, but we love each other so much. Something happened recently where I broke my foot, and he couldn't have been more involved and caring. And it was the perfect example to me, ladies, of like, when a man has a broken foot, he can do that. He can fix that. You can take to the doctor. And it was the first time I'd really seen him just pick up the phone and get involved. And I was like, oh, he was waiting for a broken bone to be able to fix. and these emotional conversations were too hard. And so that was really helpful for me to see that. But we've gone through a lot of it and kind of dealt with a really tricky moment in the second book, which is why I shared the he was there part. I still didn't know he was there. And he called me to tell me he was having his second kid, and we were so excited. And then he said, oh, by the way, my second book's going to come out, and I talk about how I was there and saw it and didn't tell you. And I went, sorry, what? And I think he thought he'd already told me that he was there. I mean, I really believe that. Our brains can do and make. I mean, look, I that memory out. And I got off the phone, and for the second time, the first time being when I remembered my trauma, it was like the ground just disappeared underneath me, because now I had to remember an entire moment from my life. And it made so much sense. And this I have a little bit of shame about. All my life I'd resented Hugh. He'd always been so successful and everybody loved him. And there was this sense underneath me of like, if you only knew, I mean, he's cool and whatever, but he's not like the best ever. And that's sort of what everyone would say. And of course, because my mitochondrial cells who hold these memories remembered a big brother leaving me. So I was always going to carry this energy of, if you only knew what he did at the moment I needed him the most. And that helped me learn to heal that in my body, where, we never let go of those things completely. Our body cannot let go completely. But now when I feel that come up, I'm like, oh, of course, that's my old body wanting to get mad at my big brother. When I'm actually just so happy that he's doing so well. But part of me is like, oh, if you only knew, I'm like, no, don't do that, because that's not the truth. That's not actually how you feel. That's your old trauma talking. So second book came out. We had a podcast about that. And now we live in this very strange world where everybody in Australia knows my story, and I'm yet to tell it myself.
Thanks for listening to The Change, a fully independent podcast. Whether you're seeking inspiration, curious about change, or just here for the great banter, we'd love you to make The Change your new go-to podcast.
And even better, send us your voice notes or questions about change. We'll use them on the show. Email us at changepod2023@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at _change_pod. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more on The Change.